Accelerate your agency's profitable growth with tools, tips, and value-added interviews with your host, agency owner and coach, Rob DaCosta.
So welcome to today's episode of the Agency Accelerator podcast. I'm really excited to have back with me, in fact, David Miles from the PPC machine. David is a long-standing client of mine, and he runs, as I said, the PPC machine, an agency that helps mortgage brokers generate high-quality leads from their website using PPC and website optimization. Now, David was actually one of my first guests on the podcast in episode 6, where we talked about niching, and David shared the benefits he's seen since niching into the mortgage broker sector. So welcome, David, and welcome back, David. And is there anything else you wanted to add to my introduction?
No, I think you obviously know me quite well, Rob. You summed it all up quite nicely. So yeah, good to be back.
Excellent. Well, it's good to have you back. Now, you've been running your agency for a number of years in its current form. And today we are talking about taking kind of like the bricks and mortar work that we do and moving it into some kind of online program. So I was really interested to hear from you what the catalyst was for you to begin exploring creating some kind of online program or online community for your audience.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's one of those things I'd thought about doing for years, and lots of people had said to me over the years, "Oh, you should take your training and move it online because then it's more scalable. You can reach more people and all that kind of thing." And I suppose, as with a lot of people, the sort of catalyst for doing something that you've talked about for a long while was when the pandemic hit last year, because obviously, well, that did two things. Firstly, in that initial 4 or 6 weeks when the business world just kind of stopped, regardless of what kind of business you're in, everyone seemed to just stop and no one wanted to commit to anything and the world ground to a halt. So that obviously gave people like me a lot more time to think about, okay, well, now I've got the time to do X, Y, and Z that I've talked about for years. And of course, the other thing was I physically couldn't deliver one-to-one training to people anymore, which, although it wasn't solely what the business was about, it was a significant part of it. So those things together really gave me the opportunity and the kick up the bum to actually get on and start thinking, right, how can I take what I've been doing in training rooms and one-to-one with people over the years and turn that into an online offering?
Yeah, I guess it's a sort of panacea that many people see with an online program, in that they are limited by their time when they're doing what you and I do, which is typically one-to-one work with clients, whether that be training or coaching or actually doing the work for them as a consultant like you do when you're running a PPC campaign for a client. And if we take it online, then there's this promise of kind of making money in your sleep and, being much more scalable. And I guess you and I both know that promise is a bit of a misnomer, really. So I think the first thing I would say to people, to our listeners, is that if you've ever dreamt about creating an online program, then absolutely go for it. But realize that, it's a different kind of effort and work that you need to put in to get the revenue as opposed to the one-to-one work. So now you settled on a membership model in the end. So I'm interested to know why that was and what other models you explored, because I guess if someone is thinking about taking their consultative work that they do and creating an online program, then they will be thinking about these different models. So how did you explore and conclude that a membership model was the right thing for you?
Yeah, so obviously there's two ways you can sell online training or online courses. Yeah, there's the selling it as a one-off thing. Yeah, here's my course, give me £1,000, have my course. Or there's the membership model, which is what I went for. But as you know, Rob, obviously initially I went down the more traditional sell it as a standalone course. And the reason, there's a few reasons I transitioned to the membership model, really. Firstly, the biggest reason I think is the membership model allows me to offer more support and ongoing help to the people who buy the course or buy what is now a program that includes the courses as one of its elements. And the reason why I think that's so important is one thing I learned very early on when I was doing face-to-face training, and I was running public training courses where on things like Google Ads and social media and stuff, and we'd have 10 to 20 delegates on each course. And the busiest point in the day for me as the trainer on a full day course was always the lunch break, because the lunch break was when the people who had a question that perhaps they were too shy to ask in front of everyone else, or they'd reflected on something while they were having their sandwich and thought, actually I didn't understand that bit, that would be when they'd all come over and want to talk to the trainer. So if anyone listening to this has ever run public training, you'll know as well as I do, you don't really get to eat lunch. That's your that's your full-on part of the day. You can relax when you get back into the training room. And I thought, well, that's something that the online courses, that bit doesn't exist. The lunch break doesn't happen. And so what I didn't want was people to buy a course and then never do it or never finish it. Because, although I suppose, you could argue either way, I've got their money, so why do I care? Well, actually, because my reason for doing this is I want to actually have people learn new skills and be able to do this stuff themselves. And so I actually want people to finish. Yes, I want the money, but I want them to finish the course as well. And so that's why I thought if I turn it into a membership, then I can offer that ongoing support and hand holding and coaching to help them through the courses. That was one reason for it. And the other reason was I felt if I sell it as a standalone course, it's kind of set in stone that this is what you get. Whereas I know that the nature of what I train on, the digital marketing world is always changing and evolving and new things are coming along. So I wanted to be able to say, well, this is the training you get as a bare minimum, but I'll be adding new stuff as time goes on, as new things happen, as I learn new things, as new things come out, whatever. And of course, that only works if people are on a membership model, because otherwise you're just obviously giving people new content for free all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are two main reasons really.
And just share with the listeners the sort of structure of your overall program. So when someone signs up, what do they get? What are the various component parts?
Yeah, so it's aimed at mortgage brokers and financial advisors who want to generate more inquiries, more leads from their own websites, basically. So when someone first joins the program, they get what I call a road mapping call with me, where it's a half-hour call to work out where they're at the moment. Because that's the other thing, people join the program. Some have done no online marketing, some have done a fair bit, and that's why, again, with a membership, you can flex it around what fits each individual. So I help them work out where they're at the moment, what their priorities should be. And then they've got access to a whole library of online courses covering all the different things. And the road mapping call allows me to recommend to them, you should start with this course or that course. Because I don't expect people to work through from course number 1 to course number 20 or whatever, necessarily in that order. It might be that I talk to one person and it's clear that they don't have a good value proposition on their website. So I would say to them, right, go and do the course on value propositions. Or maybe, they've got a great website, but they're trying to run some Google ads. So I'll say, right, go and start with this course on Google ads. So I can point people in a different direction. So they've got that whole library of courses. But the most important thing they get as part of the program is once a fortnight, they get a group coaching call online with me and the other brokers. And the idea of that is each time an hour-long call, and each time I have a sort of starter topic that I talk about for 20, 25 minutes, a bit of live training. So like the one we did a week or so ago, I was talking all about how to use email marketing. A couple of weeks before that, we were talking about how to write better copy for your website. And then the second half of the call is people asking questions, either on what I've just spoken about or whatever they're working on at that moment. So, we had someone on the call last time who'd been setting up some Google Ads campaigns, wasn't getting as much traffic from it as they thought they should do. And I sort of looked at it live on air with them and said, right, well, if you change this and this and this. So obviously all the others are learning from that as well. And that's what I think sets it apart from just paying £1,000 for an online course. And there's a community as well, online community where people can ask questions, get support and answers from me and other brokers and everything.
Yeah, so some good structure, and obviously that's a similar structure to my coaching program, the Self-Running Agency. I think people buy courses and people buy books with great intention of reading them or completing the course, and then life gets in the way and they never do it. And there's this whole group of kind of course collectors that probably you and I have both been guilty of, and I know lots of listeners will relate to that. And so whatever we can do to encourage people to actually follow the content and implement the content and participate in the forums and the group calls and so on, the better, because at the end of the day, this is about, like you say, people making a difference in their business through the content that you offer.
Exactly. The way I view it is the way I view it is if you've got those fortnightly coaching calls, if all you do as as a bare minimum is come to those, at least it means once a fortnight you're spending an hour working on your business and working on your marketing. But so however much life gets in the way, you've got that kind of rock in my diary.
Yeah.
And often you
Yeah.
only have to do one thing. We did a coaching call a couple of months ago about the importance of social proof and online reviews. And one of the guys on the call took one idea that I'd given, actually went away and implemented it, and got an extra like 80 odd reviews on his Google reviews within 24 hours. So whereas if he
Wow.
hadn't come to that call, he could have done that at any time. And the idea I gave wasn't rocket science, but if he hadn't come to that call, he'd never have got around to doing that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And of course, we do this, like you say, we want to make money, but we do it because we want to make a difference. And we know that we can help people. For me, the catalyst of creating my course, the self-running agency implementation group, was because I was having so many of the same conversations over and over again with my private coaching clients that I thought, is there a way we can expedite this and we can actually save some time on our private calls by me saying, well, actually go watch module 3, lesson 4, because that you can dig into that in your own time at your own pace. There's lots of associated downloads. So that was my catalyst. And I call my group an implementation group because it is all about doing. It's not just about watching. In fact, I don't want people to watch these programs from A to Z, because a lot of people do watch courses from A to Z. They have great intentions of implementing what they've learned, and then they don't implement it. So I'm much more like, watch a 10-minute lesson, go and implement it, and then move on to the next thing. So tell me, so you've launched this program.
That's not unique.
Sorry, go on.
That's not unique to the online world either. I mean, going back to the days when I ran a traditional training company, we found the same thing there, that people would come on a course and they would leave with all good intentions, but they would have what we call FTI, failure to implement. And one of the things I actually did there to try to address that was I remember doing it with the Google Ads course and saying, right, if you've come on my full day Google Ads training course, if you want, you can upgrade and come back for a half day implementation workshop, a few days later or a week. And that people found that really useful because they turned up to our offices with their laptop and they spent half an hour putting into practice what they'd learned. Yeah. And it did two things. It meant they'd got that time blocked out to do it, but also crucially, I and the other trainers were on hand. So if they got stuck or needed reminding of something, you could do it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to recreate here, really, with in the online world.
Yeah, that's great. I think anything we can do to encourage people to take action, not just learn, is really good. So now I think you've been running this program for about 6 months now. So tell us how it's going.
So we launched beginning of November, it's going really well. The numbers of members are growing month by month. We've not as yet done huge amounts of marketing around it. I'm just starting to have a bit more of a kind of push to get more people on board. But primarily, the people who've joined so far have been people who were already aware of me and what I do, were already on my mailing list. Perhaps come some of my free Facebook lives and stuff like that. And they're the people who've said yes, we'd like more of this, basically. So they're the ones who've joined.
Right. And what would you say, like reflecting back on the last 6 months, what would you say the hardest part of putting this kind of program together, launching it, and then marketing it is?
Funnily enough, I don't think creating the content is the hardest part, even though that's probably what most people, if there are people listening to this thinking of doing this, I bet the thing that's putting them off is thinking, oh my God, I've got to create a whole load of online courses. I can't possibly do that. I don't have the skills. I don't have the time. I don't have the whatever. I don't think that is the hardest part. And again, another beauty of the membership is you don't have to launch with everything completely finished. If you've got your core offering of courses there, and again, if it's a membership like mine, where it's not all about the courses, it's more about the fortnightly coaching, then you don't need to have this huge finished product before you launch. So I think that's one thing I've learned, is that the thing I thought would be the biggest challenge or the biggest hurdle actually wasn't. I would say the hardest thing is probably is getting people to engage, getting them sort of join in the community and come to the things, because I know that those who do turn up to the coaching love it and get great value from it. But as with all these things, there's always some who aren't able to make it or don't turn up, and that's the hardest thing is you can take a horse to water, can't you? But
Yeah,
so they
I
don't
would
use that.
completely,
And I know from
I
talking to other
completely agree.
membership owners, they have similar problems. So
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, I always makes me laugh that the hardest thing, the way I run my program is like people have to submit the questions in advance of our group calls. And it's sometimes like getting blood out of stone. I always get the questions and they always come in at the last minute, but sometimes they're literally coming in at 9 o'clock when the call's at 10, even though I start sort of reminding everybody the week before. I think a really good bit of advice that you just shared there is that you don't need to have everything ready. In fact, if you're launching a program yourself, you need to create a minimum viable offer, which is something that you can start selling and is the bare bones of your program, because the input you get from your members is really going to help you shape what the future of it is and what new content you need to create. So like you said, a lot of people will probably thinking I've got to create this massive compendium of A to Z of all this content and it's going to take me months and months and months, and therefore they never get going. But the truth of it is you don't need to have everything ready. And actually, my program isn't a membership program. It's a sort of like a 9-month program. And I still am adding content, and I've been running my program for a year and a half now, and I'm still adding new content as I feel it's relevant. I think another piece of advice I would give is that no one is going to judge how good your program is by the quantity of content. You don't need content about everything. You just need to have good quality content. Talk to us a little bit about the tech, because I think the other thing that puts a lot of people off is all of the component parts that they need to put in place to make this work. So tell us a little bit about the tech that you're using and what you explored.
you're right. I think that can be, because there's so many different choices of tech. But I think part of the problem can be it's not even getting your head around how to use it. It's that potential overwhelm of there's just too much choice. The system that I'm using is probably not the most straightforward, to be honest, because I'm one of those people who likes to kind of take the best bit of software for this job and combine it with the best bit of software for this job. And I liken it to back in the days when before MP3s and people listened to music on proper hi-fis and whatever. There were some people who would like to go out and just buy the Amstrad all-in-one system because it was simple and you plugged it in and it worked. And then there were others like me who would like to go out and buy the Marantz CD player and the name amp and all the different, and then connect them all together. And I'm similar with software, so my setup is perhaps not the most simple, but it works for me. So I use a system called Thrive Apprentice, which is part of the Thrive suite of products that my whole website is built on. So Thrive Apprentice is their module for creating online courses. All my courses are created on that. I use Vimeo for my video hosting. So if I want to create a course, basically I create a PowerPoint slide deck to go with it, like you would for a real world training course, and I go through that. I'm screen recording it. I use a bit of software called Screencast-O-Matic for doing the screen recording, which is really great. It's a low costing. It cost me, I don't know, something like £70 a year, I think, if I had to guess, but it's not a significant amount of money. And that does all the screen recording. It's got a video editor built into it afterwards. So afterwards, you can take the recording you've done, you can top and tail it, you can edit out the ums and the ahs. If you've screwed up a bit of it, you can re-record a narration over the bit that you've messed up. It's dead easy to use. It's not got tons of video editing features, but then that's nice because then it's not confusing. But it's got all the ones you need for doing a course creation. I then upload that to Vimeo, and then I can create my lesson in Thrive Apprentice and say, pull this video in. I can put the lesson notes in there. So that's what I use for creating that kind of online content. My group coaching calls, no fancy tech involved there. It's a paid Zoom account, and I set it up as a Zoom meeting. I send the link out and the agenda to people beforehand, and they join the call. And what I do with all of those coaching calls is because they themselves are an ever-growing library of useful stuff. So I record them all via Zoom's record function, and I just turn those into a video that's available to the members afterwards. And for my community, I use a platform called Mighty Networks, which is kind of like, it's basically where you can create your own private version of Facebook, really. And yeah, so I use that to host the community. So that's sort of how I do it with all different components and different bits. Oh, and the other main component is to actually sell the membership. take people's monthly payments. I use Thrivecart, and my plugin for WordPress that runs the member database is called Wishlist Member. That's what it's called. So I'm using different bits of everything. I know, at the other extreme, well, I know you use Kartra, don't you? Which is basically, it has all those components all in one package. So, if people like fiddling with the tech, then you can do what I've done. If you just want an off-the-shelf thing, something like Kartra, or I've heard people speak highly of Member Mouse as another thing that kind of does the whole lot. But one of the things I did, early on was did quite a bit of reading around different membership systems, and then I think it's important to get that right, because obviously migrating from one membership system to another is quite a pain. So I would say definitely get that right. But with the other stuff, if I suddenly decided I didn't like Vimeo anymore, or I wanted to put my courses on a different thing, it wouldn't be that difficult to move the videos from one platform to another or something like that. But moving all your members off one checkout system and one member system to another, that's a bit more of a headache. So put the time and effort into getting that right.
Sure. Yeah, good advice. And I will put links in the show notes to all of the tools that David just mentioned in case you want to look at them. And as David said, I think we both went through a fairly thorough assessment. In fact, prior to me moving to Kartra, I used to host some individual training courses on Teachable, which is a specific course platform. So it's a really good platform for taking payments and delivering the content, but it didn't do enough from a membership perspective, I guess. So I decided to move to Kartra, and as David said, Kartra is an all-in-one platform. So I host my videos there, I host my course programs there, I take all the payments there, all my email marketing is hosted in one platform. The advantage of that is it integrates really well and it's more straightforward. The disadvantage is it's not as flexible. So what David sort of talked about was like picking best of breed tools and then connecting them together. And what I do is making the connection piece really easy, but perhaps compromising in some aspects. Although things like Kartra are getting better all the time. And as you said, there's other tools like Membership Mouse, and Kajabi is another well-known tool. So what advice would you give to somebody else if they were thinking about, they're listening to this and they're listening because they thought about, how can I stop selling one-to-one work? How can I take what I know and put it online? What advice would you give them?
I think the two things I would say, one you've touched on already, is go with the minimum viable product. So don't feel you've got to spend 6 months or a year creating something huge before you launch, because the big risk if you do that is you might create something that nobody wants, and then you've wasted a year of your life. So decide what your minimum viable product is for launch, and commit to launching when you have that level of product, that level of membership available. The second thing I would say is really important is create a waiting list. And this is something that I did when I launched mine. If I were going back in time, I would maybe spend longer launching the waiting list, but I'm impatient, so I didn't. But the beauty of having a waiting list, so what I'm talking about here is you start telling people, people on your existing mailing list, people, existing clients, contacts, prospects, whatever your database of contacts is, you start telling them, this is what I'm working on, this is coming. Are you interested in it? Do you want to join the waiting list? And I did that, and it's totally no obligation. I just said to people on a number of occasions, I'm creating this program. This is the outline of what it's going to look like, what the components of it will be. If you're interested in being one of the first to know when it launches, and getting in at a special founder members price and all that kind of thing, then just click here, and that added them to a waiting list. And that meant that at the time when I actually launched, I forget how many I had on the waiting list, but it wasn't a vast number. It was like, I don't know, 50 to 100 people, maybe. It meant I had that core of people who basically already committed that they were going to do it. They knew roughly what was going to be in the program. They knew what it was going to cost them. And so I sent the thing out saying, right, it's launching on this date. That was like a week beforehand. So you're building up that anticipation. And when I sort of actually opened the doors, as it were, and said, right, this is it, that got me my first 10 sign-ups something within the first hour. And that is, it's good from the commercial point of view, but it gets some money coming in for the membership straight away. But more importantly than that, it immediately validates that you've done something good, because you've told people what it is you're going to be selling. Okay, they've not actually parted with money yet, but they've said, we're on the waiting list, we will do as soon as you launch it. And then a decent percentage of those actually do it when the time comes. You think, right, yes, I have got something here which is right. I've got a viable product, and that gives you the impetus to then say, right, now we're into phase 2. How do I grow the membership? How do I get more people into it? Whatever. But I think that's really important.
Yeah.
What you don't want is a membership where you've got 2 members, particularly if you're doing things like group coaching calls or whatever, because it doesn't have much energy, does it? If actually it's only it's you and 2 people.
Yeah, and really good advice. I think the thing I would say to anybody that's thinking about doing this is do your research and do your validation. And the only way you really validate a program is by someone buying it, because someone might tell you that they're interested, but telling you they're interested in parting with their cash are 2 different things. So as part of your research and your validation, you need to pre-sell your program using a minimum viable offer. And at that stage, you probably don't have any content created. You've just mapped out what it will look like. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a guide that I've created on validation and research to help people go through those steps, because, I've launched at least 7 programs in the past without doing this, and they've all been failure to one degree or another. So it was only after literally 7 courses over the last probably 6 or 7 years that I realized I needed to do this validation properly before I launch a course. There's a big difference between you thinking you know what your audience wants and your audience actually wanting something. So I think that's really good advice.
I think something else to say there, Rob, as well. Sorry, I spoke over you.
Sorry,
I think something else to say there as well is that validation idea, that isn't unique to just memberships. So if you were doing the more traditional launching a one-off online course, you can still do that validation and that minimum viable product. So if you'd say you were doing a course that was ultimately going to have 30 lessons in it, you could launch it and start selling it when you've created, say, the first 5 or 10 lessons. And you just say to those people, the other lessons will be delivered over the next 2 months or something. Because again, that means you can actually, test out the actual idea by getting some people on board. And if you've created your first 10 lessons and you're starting to lag a bit and thinking, oh, this is hard work, well, nothing motivates you like having a load of people who've paid for the other 20 lessons and who are waiting to receive them. So don't think about those things as just applying to memberships. It can be transferred to ordinary one-off courses as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, there's nothing like putting something live to motivate you to get stuff done. Is there anything you would do differently if you were going to start again? Would you do anything differently that you've done so far?
Well, I think the thing I said about making the waiting list period a bit longer, I would probably do that differently next time. And I suppose another thing I would do differently. Well, one of the things in my case, of course, was I did try and create this as a one-off course and then transitioned it to a membership. So knowing what I know now, I would have done it as a membership from day one, and that would automatically have made the waiting list period longer, because the waiting list would have been building up while I was creating, all the courses from scratch. Whereas by the time I did my waiting list, I'd already got a lot of the stuff I needed ready to launch. So yeah, I think extending that phase would be something I would do differently. But other than that, no, I think that's the main thing I've changed. That's the beauty of a membership.
Yeah,
You could tweak it and change things as you go through. And if suddenly you've got members saying, "Oh, it'd be really nice if the program included this," or this hasn't happened to me, but if people said, "Oh, we'd rather only have a coaching call once a month rather than once a fortnight," well, you can make those changes as you go. So I don't think you have to have everything set in stone right from day one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me ask you a massive question and see if you can answer it in 1 minute, just because I'm conscious of time. One aspect, and maybe this is a separate podcast altogether, but one aspect that we haven't discussed is pricing. Like, how on earth do you work out how much to charge, whether it be a one-off fee, a several payment fee like I have in my program, or a monthly reoccurring membership fee? How did you start figuring out the pricing?
I've no idea. It's a short answer. You're right. It's a massive question, and I've read so many different theories on pricing and what you should do and shouldn't do with it. The route I've gone for with it is to try and keep it as something where it's a low monthly amount, because I don't want people to be thinking too hard about A, whether to join in the first place, or B, whether to keep their membership going. I don't want price to be a barrier to them coming on board. What I would say is, don't get obsessed with what each individual person is paying, because if I looked at what someone on my membership gets for the monthly membership they pay, I'm like, oh, I'm selling myself way too cheap. What I do instead is look at what is my total revenue from the membership, and then I think, actually, yeah, that works. So when I look at the time it takes me to go and do 2 group coaching calls per month, for example, I think, yeah, that's actually, I'm content with that as an hourly rate, or whatever you want to call it. So I would say price it such that people don't have to think too hard about joining and don't have to think too hard about staying. Think about the value that they're getting from it. But the problem with it is, memberships cover a huge range of things. Some people run memberships and online courses where what you're teaching someone is something to do with their hobby. So maybe you've got a membership about, I don't know, how to play the guitar better. Well, that's for most people only going to be their hobby. They'll never get a return on that investment other than the pleasure they get from playing the guitar better. With something like my membership, I can price it at the higher end, because if you're a mortgage broker joining this, if it gets you just one extra client per month from what you learn from this, that's put another £1,000 a month on your bottom line. So I think that's what you need to think about when you're pricing, thinking, what's the actual value to the kind of people who are joining this? How much could it change their business or change their life? And therefore, what will they be willing to pay for it? But I would rather, with any membership, have a lot of people paying a lower amount of money than have 10 people paying me £500 a month, because I want that community and that
So
that
I think, so I agree with that. And of course, one of the ways you can get some sense of pricing for whatever your program is going to be and whatever topic it's going to be, and for whatever market, is just to do some research and find out what other people are charging. That's a good starting point. I also think in the early days, because I know both you and I did this, is that you have a sort of founder's rate, and you almost use that as a way to get people through the door early, because you tell them the price is going up. And what you need to do is start at a low rate and then increase the price until you reach a point where you've hit that sort of sweet spot, which is the right fee for you and the right fee for your market as well. So like I said, it was probably an unfair question to ask you right at the end, but I just wanted to get that one in. So as you know, the last question I ask all my guests, and I deliberately asked David not to go back and listen to episode 6 to see what he said before, but I'll do that after this, is if you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, I haven't been back and checked, but there are actually 2 bits of advice, because I think since you asked me that on episode 6, I think I got asked it on someone else's podcast and gave a different answer. So I'm going to give both.
Okay.
The 2 bits of advice I would give to my younger business self are: niche your business, because I didn't do that until about 5 or 6 years ago, and I wish I'd done it sooner. And the second piece of advice would be, start building your email list, because, again, that's something that I only really started focusing heavily on a few years ago. If I'd started doing that 10, 20 years ago, I'd have an even bigger, my email list is a massive asset. And like I said, it was where the majority of my members have come from for my membership program. Imagine if I'd started building that 15 years ago, it would have been even bigger and better. So start building a list. And niche your business.
Two great pieces of advice. And, my listeners will know that I bang on the drum about both of those. And sometimes it's really hard to get people to figure out that actually building your email list is going to be one of your most valuable assets. And it'll be one of the most valuable assets if you want to sell your agency. And it's certainly going to be the sort of pool that you swim in and fish in. And if you can make that pool as big as possible. And of course, as we all know, niching your agency means higher prices, easier for your clients to find you, and easier to look different to your competitors. So good piece of advice. And I will go back and check out what you said on episode 6 to see if it's the same or it's something different. But I'm not sure if I don't think we've ever had either of those two pieces of advice before, so that's always great. David, if people are listening to this and they want to find out more about you and particularly check out your program, where would they go?
If they go to the website, which is theppcmachine.co.uk, all the stuff's there. If they specifically want to know about the program, it's theppcmachine.co.uk/PPP, because the program is called the Predictable Pipeline Program, PPP. And obviously, if they want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter as @DavidMiles. I'm, all the usual places.
Yeah, so we just scribbling this down. We will add all those links into the show notes, and so people can check out what we've been talking about today, see what your sales page for your program looks like, get some other ideas. But I wanted to thank you today for joining us, David. This has been a topic that I haven't talked about before, but it's interesting. And I think, like you said, the catalyst has been the pandemic, that more people are starting to think about taking their agency work and moving it online in some form, but they often don't do it because they don't know where to start, or it feels such a huge task. So I hope that the advice you've shared with people today will help them make that journey a little bit more pain-free for them.
Hopefully, yeah. No, thank you very much, Rob. It's been a pleasure chatting to you as always, and I hope it's given people some useful advice.
We'll see you again soon.
Okay, cheers. Bye.